Rejection isn't the end. It's in fact a launch pad. Once you shift how you see it, rejection becomes one of your most powerful tools to align you with your most greatest goals. My name is Peter Abundant, aka Dr. Abundant, PhD, an ordained minister of metaphysical sciences, the study of spirituality. I'm also the author of The Enlightened Shadow and Spiritual, Not Religious, both available on Amazon and Audible. Rejection. Rejection is one of those things that we just can't stand. We can't seem to understand the significance and why. It's just something that we need to take ownership of, but see how it actually benefits us. Because the reality is the universe is always trying to support you. The universe is always looking out for you, giving you things to actually benefit from. But if you don't have the foresight, the connection with oneself to actually be able to use your perspective in alignment with that understanding, then rejection becomes something that really often shoots you down, you see. So you have to understand the language of rejection. Now, rejection is something that I'm sure you've experienced. We've all been there. And, the younger we were, the more difficult it was to handle rejection, to understand rejection, to accept it, to evolve past it, right? To gain the wisdom and knowledge that it actually holds within it. Whether you were rejected by a girl, a boy, a job, right? Already an established relationship, even a dream that really matters to you. We've all been there. But what I want you to understand is that the rejection in itself wasn't it wasn't evidence or proof that there is something wrong with you. It wasn't evidence or proof that you were missing or that you weren't worthy, that you weren't equipped, that it wasn't meant for you. It was actually something that gives you a sense of recognition that, that hurt. And though it's not easy to feel like you're not enough, it is actually a tool, a signal that you weren't, it's not that you weren't enough, it's that you weren't properly aligned. And the rejection was actually, the intention is to align you, you see? And so because we're not trained with that initially, especially growing up as kids, what happens is that rejection becomes a shutdown, right? It becomes a signal to stop, when in fact, rejection was simply the signal to shift, to recalibrate, to make a change, not in who you are, but essentially how you are moving toward, right? How you are approaching this desire, this thing that you are a part of, you see? So the main thing is I want you to understand is that you're not alone, right? This is something that we've all faced and may continue to face in life. But the thing is, as you begin to recognize that, okay, we all face rejection to various degrees, whenever it's something that we all face, whether it be rejection, whether it be heartache, whether it be, acknowledging that we have an ego, acknowledging that we have a consciousness, then we recognize that, okay, if all of us have it, then there can't be, something wrong with it. In fact, it is part of why we are here. It is part of the program, the system that we are to come into ourselves, in. It is part of the game, so to speak. And so you learn that the key is how you respond to rejection, not just simply taking it at face value and then stopping your journey, you see? So when it comes to rejection and everything else that we experience that is quote unquote negative, it really comes down to reframing what that is, reframing what that looks like. Going from the mindset that this is a setback or that this is a failure to truly acknowledging that this is simply a stepping stone. This is simply a step of on the ladder of your success and your fulfillment, your happiness and joy. You see? So what if you stop seeing rejection as proof that you failed, but ultimately seeing rejection as evidence that you are to simply move along this journey, right? That you are to continue, because continuing or even taking this on as a journey means that there are steps, means that there is a process, that there is progress to be had along the way. Just like if you were taking a real physical journey, right? If you are, say, taking a nature walk, you're on a trail and you're walking on this trail, there are moments where you can identify the peak, right? Or you can even identify the end of the trail, especially if it's a difficult road or a difficult trail. And what you want to do is acknowledge that though it may be difficult, when you understand that there is an objective, that there is a mission, there is something to obtain, achieve, and you are to, see that evidence in what's coming, right? You are able to look ahead and you can see, okay, there is a hill here, there are some rocks here, there is, maybe some water here that you have to jump over, step over, walk over. There's some rocks that you have to be more mindful about. And then at the end, you can see the very peak, meaning that you can actually see that these moments, right, which we can identify as rejection, are actually just giving you some terrain, giving you some even, a opportunity to not be bored, because it's not just a straight, flat path, right? But it's actually terrain. There is actually something that actually adds excitement. Then you recognize that, okay, this path is just simply one that prepares me. And that because you can see the trajectory at the end, you can see the peak, you understand that, okay, well, these things don't really matter, because not in the grand scheme of wanting to stop or failure, because you recognize that all you got to do is just figure out a way to get around it in order for you to reach your goal. You see? And so, but many times we are so focused in the step, the moment, and we see these, obstacles as a reason to stop, right? When we in fact should take it as a reason to look within, tap into our ability, strategize, right? Recalibrate, think about how you can do it, and then that really gets you moving. That gets you to a place of recognizing your own power, gaining more confidence, gaining more insight, and then pushing forward. So rejection is essentially you facing these various obstacles along the path of your success, along the path of your personal fulfillment, of your spiritual enlightenment. You're not going to stop. You just simply have to figure it out and keep it moving, right? So rejection is simply just needs to be seen as redirection. It needs to be seen as a lesson. It needs to be seen as a necessary pivot, a moment of course correction. And once you see that as what it is, right, just simply you recognizing that, okay, maybe there is something that you just need to push through, or maybe you just need to be more mindful, right? If there's a wall in front of you, you don't just simply stop. You look around, you look for a door, you look for where the wall ends, or you just simply look at the top of the wall and say, well, you know what, I can climb that. Or look for a ladder, or look for a friend to boost you up so you can climb that. And then you can come across and pull them over. You always look for a way, because essentially your mission, your purpose is in fact what you are destined for. And there should never be a moment where you feel so rejected that you quit, especially when it comes to your dreams. Your dreams are always custom built for you. They're meant for you. You wouldn't have these dreams if they were not meant for you to fulfill. So you have to get out of your head. You have to stop following your ego. Your ego is just driven by fear. Okay. That's what it does. It creates a space where you can want to protect yourself from harm, which means it doesn't want to move. It doesn't want to evolve, you know? But when you're following your consciousness, which is the part of you that has that desire, has that dream, has that passion, then you simply recognize that there is no failure, right? There is no failure because the divine doesn't fail, you know? So rejection doesn't define your value, in terms of how we usually define rejection. What it does is it reveals areas of growth, it reveals where you are being guided to something better. That's all it is. It is just simply a moment of being mindful. And when you are mindful, right, then that's when you actually take on the ability to simply just recognize that, oh, okay, this is just part of the journey. This is just part of the journey. And you're just going to keep moving forward in this journey. And you're just going to make corrections based on the circumstance, based on who you are at the moment and how you are to transform, to ascend into who you truly are, you see? Because a lot of times we're dealing with basically a contrast of two versions of self, your current self and your true self, right? Your future self. And so your job is to really understand that rejection is just simply a opportunity to strategize, right? To reframe that rejection into an understanding of tapping into your power and recognizing that you are meant to fulfill this desire, this purpose, this thing. And even if it is something like a relationship where a person decides they simply just don't want to be connected or associated with you, that is okay. You look at that as an opportunity, a opportunity to reframe that this relationship is meant for something else. Maybe it's not meant for a lifelong commitment. Maybe it's just simply meant for you to have some contrasts, right? Some input, and to prepare you for the absolute and true relationship that you wish to have. You see? So here's some practical strategies to help you reframe rejection. The first thing is writing it out. Journaling is very important, okay? Write out what happened, let yourself feel it, get into it, and then ask, like, what can you learn from this? Another thing you can do, which I find is very helpful if you're somebody who's into tech, if you're into AI, if you're using ChatGPT or these other platforms, a good thing is to have a conversation with AI, just kind of brain dump everything that's happening, type it out, talk to it, and really allow yourself to have a dialogue, a bounce back and forth of communication between you and the AI. And that'll just give you some perspective, more insight. If you want to have that with a therapist or even a friend, that's fine as well. But with AI, we know that it is more objective, so it can really listen to you, get to know you, and actually give you the insight that will relate to you, rather than a person may give you insight, but it'll be more from a subjective point of view, right? It'll be more from their perspective, and their reality. So you have to be a little bit more mindful about that, So yeah, you can talk to somebody you trust, to gain a fresh perspective, but you let others just remind you as to who you really are. So it has to be people that are similar to you in the journey that you're on when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to, connecting with that higher self, that divine self. And so, when you talk to people, make sure you talk to a particular kind of person. You can't just talk to anybody. Make sure you're talking to somebody who's in alignment with themselves, who's in harmony with themselves, who's happy, fulfilled, who is aware. You see? The next thing, and probably the most important thing, is to practice self-compassion. Go easy on yourself, okay? You're not weak for feeling hurt. You're not weak for feeling a little down, a little depressed from the moment. You're human. So with that, you're going to have a fluctuation of emotions, whether they be high emotions, higher frequency emotions, happiness, joy, to low frequency emotions, sadness, hurt, depression, anger, you know, but you have to just be mindful about them, aware of them, and most certainly don't let those emotions dictate your action. You let those emotions be put in its proper place and use those emotions productively, okay, proactively, intentionally, geared toward getting the thing that you ultimately desire, being the person you know yourself to truly be deep within and manifest that without. You see, you're constantly growing. So with that, you recognize that, hey, there are going to be moments where you have to basically refine yourself and let the moment that you're going through actually refine your movements, your moment, you know? So let the moment fuel your refinement, you see? And you use it as a opportunity to be clear about your path. Sometimes when I'm feeling rejection, meaning I'm dealing with a unforeseen obstacle. If I have maybe an expectation that I want something to go a certain way, and if I'm attached to that expectation and it doesn't happen accordingly as I envisioned, then I may feel, sad about it, depressed about it, upset about it, you know? But after being mindful, being still, I recognize that the opportunity, the moment actually fuels me refining myself and my approach. It actually gives me clarity as to my path, you see, and it'll sharpen your next move. It shows you, okay, this approach that I took, that I put work and effort and time into didn't work. Therefore, okay, I'm going to try this way. It makes your path clearer. And as long as you do not quit, then you will ultimately succeed. You just have to be at a space where you have complete faith in you, your purpose, and what it is that you're meant to do here. You see? Now, yeah, it may not, the success may not look like what you probably have envisioned for yourself. It may not be a grand, extravagant result, but ultimately what you want to experience is alignment. What you want to experience is fulfillment, joy in the moment, joy in the journey, along the journey, not focused on just the destination. You see, when you focus on the destination, guess what? You're not being present and in the moment. So you always want to be mindful and intentional about how you feel now with what it is that you're doing. Are you happy, fulfilled, excited, focused? Are you in a zone when you're doing this work or doing this thing or being with this person? You see? And no matter what happens, no matter what obstacles happen, no matter what signs or kinds of rejections that show up, you are clear as to who you are and what you desire. And you just simply figure out a way to get around it, to get over it, to learn from it. And then you continue to move forward along the path that you are meant to be on. You see? So it gives you the opportunity to celebrate your strengths, because oftentimes with rejection, we often think about our weaknesses. We think about, okay, this didn't go well because I'm not good enough. But when you reframe it and you think about it differently, you simply just have an opportunity to say, okay, why didn't this go the way that I desired or wanted it to go? Then, okay, what could I do differently? And when you think about what you can do differently, you tend to lean into your strengths, you see? And when you lean into your strengths, you will always find yourself leaning into alignment. It doesn't mean you ignore the things you're not so great at, But when you lean towards your strengths, you naturally will bring in the things you're not so good at. And those things will eventually get better over time. But you have to acknowledge your strengths because that will lend itself to your true self. That will lend itself to you being led by consciousness, you know? So you have to reflect on what you've done right. You have to really get more involved in that part, focus more on that part, and that will carry everything else with it. You see, instead of being like focused on how far you've come, like you want to really think about the moment, you know, think about the moment, think about, you can think about how far you've come, but don't let it put pressure on you. Don't let it put a sense of, urgency that you need to do more faster. You need to get further, just simply continue on doing the things that align with who you are, learning from the opportunities, right? Not the rejections, because that's part of the reframing, right? Stay open to new doors, new opportunities, new ways of thinking, new inspirations, new ideas. You know, rejection might be, the closing of one door, but it's pointing you to another better, right? A better way. So be really conscious and mindful about that. And when you are, then things start to truly shift and open up for you. Then you turn, from rejection to resilience. You embrace this growth mindset. And every time you face rejection, you raise again because it is no longer rejection. It is just simply acknowledgement. It is simply adjustment, right? It is simply you building emotional muscle and you becoming your true self, you aligning with that divine power and your ability to just simply keep moving forward. I say that eventually it gets to a point where, whether it be rejections, challenges, obstacles, it gets to a point where you don't even see them anymore because they're just not in your reality. They're not in your field of vision. You are just simply focused, tunnel vision on the objective, on the goal, whether it be financial freedom, whether it be to travel the world, whether it be to attract and manifest and cultivate a beautiful relationship, whether it be your spiritual fulfillment and success and enlightenment. You see? But it takes you being able to bounce back. The more you bounce back, the stronger you get. So I need you to recognize that it is being consistent, being repetitive, being willing to go into the trenches, being willing to walk through the fire over and over and over again. Eventually, that fire goes from hot to lukewarm to, tropical. You see? So you have to just be willing. And that takes faith in yourself. And I want you to have that faith in yourself because you've gotten this far. You've done all the things, right? You've made it through. And so anything else, you will most certainly make it through. But now, with this kind of mindset, not only will you make it through, these things, these rejections, these challenges will actually feed you. They will support you. You will take them and you will simply collect more wisdom, knowledge, and power with everything that happens, So remember, every no is just another step toward an aligned yes. And that's what I need you to understand. Every no will lead you to a yes, So what does that mean? That means that ultimately every no is a yes. You just have to simply keep going. That's the only thing. That's all you have to do. So if you are ready to stop taking rejection personally, and start using it as a power, this is your time, right? This is you really turning the pages, right? Tuning into the power. So let's reframe it, let's learn from it, and move forward with purpose. And let go of the rejections. Let go of the idea of failures. The only failure is absolutely giving up. And as long as you keep moving forward, as long as you're paying attention, you're taking in the wisdom, the insight of whatever you're going through or what you have gone through, then you will always succeed. You will always be successful. You will always find fulfillment, happiness, and joy along your path. Thank you so much. Feel free to go to drabundant.com, subscribe to my daily newsletter, and get access to this free ebook, The Power Within. Please continue to join me on this journey. Peace and abundance always.